Well, hello there, Niels. Welcome to our oral presentation, our analysis and interpretation of the Boogeyman. First of all, we have a little note for you because the screencast video thing that you sent to us, it didn't work with us, so we had to be more creative and make another video. So yeah, we hope it's okay.
Yeah.
And we also got another little thing to say.
I don't know if you have noticed, Nils, but it's getting darker outside, and we're sitting in front of 3 closets. And we just read the story all over again, and it's just as goddamn scary as the first time we read it. So, I hope you got respect for us, Nils, because we are very, very scared right now.
So
yes.
Yeah, so bear with us if we're just shaking a little. But yes, through this analysis and interpretation, we're going to have a little about. No, we're going to talk a little about the story in general, an introduction. Then we're going to characterize Lester Billings, our main character. Afterwards, we're going to talk about horror features and the genre of the story. And then we're going to talk a bit about the message of the story. And last but not least, we would like to sum up our main points in a little conclusion for you.
Yes. So, yeah. Well, look. In this postmodern society that we live in today, we live in constant doubt and confusion. We're living in a weekday under stress and pressure. What are important to us and what are our core values? Many people ask themselves this specific question every single day, but they never really get an answer to rely on. This specific question is often a table for many people because it can have a huge effect on your life and the people around you. If your worth is not in the right place, it can end up taking everything. It can end up taking the things you love the most, but you just haven't appreciated enough. This is exactly what happens to our main character, Lester Billings, in The Boogeyman, written by Stephen King. In this horror story, we read about Lester Billings, who is sitting with his psychologist, Dr. Harper. He's trying to tell Dr. Harper how his 3 kids were killed, and in the beginning he gets us thinking that he's just a madman and a crazy person who killed his own children, but at the end we get a much bigger surprise that we didn't expect, actually a much deeper surprise that we didn't expect. Yeah. And to go straight to the characterization of our main character, Lester Billings. Lester is 28 years old and he is employed by an industrial firm in Connecticut, New York. He's a very confused man who's highly confused about his identity and his values. He doesn't really know what has a big meaning to him and what doesn't have a big meaning to him. So, yeah. Also, he's divorced from his ex-wife, Rita. Rita, who is actually also in the text, and they're married in the text before they got divorced. Yeah, so she's also a big part of this, and yeah, Lester Billings is extremely devoted to the old-fashioned mentality, and you can see that in the way he speaks to Rita and her meaning in his life. And you can see that by the quote, "A wife should follow her husband," from page 40, and this quote indicates...
Sorry about that,
Nils.
We'll just try to, speak more clearly.
Speak louder, because you guys playing along. I'm like, hello. Okay, well, this quote indicates that Billings is a very, very old-fashioned man in the way he's reacting, but also that his wife Rita is living under constant oppression from her husband. And also his actions regarding his children are for him some kind of competition and power struggle against Rita. As for example, when Billings chose to move all his kids into the same room where he knew the Boogeyman would be in the closet to kill them, he just did it to have control over his wife, and so Rita didn't have anything to say. Yeah, and as we mentioned before, Billings has had 3 children, but they're all deceased, and there are all different explanations to how the children died. And these many explanations is exactly what is confusing Billings, and also why he seeks this psychologist, Dr. Harper. He doesn't feel that he can tell the story to anyone without being stigmatized as a sociopath.
Yeah, and that the fact that he starts telling Dr. Harper that he killed his own children, that gives us as reader an insight in what we think is a madman's mind. But also later in the conversation, Billings contradicts himself by saying that it was the boogeyman who killed the children. And this contradiction makes us as readers raise a question to Billings' reliability and also raise a question to his version of the story. And you think that when Billings begins the interview with Dr. Harper by saying, I can't go to a priest because I'm not a Catholic. I can't go to a lawyer because I haven't done anything to consult a lawyer about. All I did was kill my kids, one at a time. Killed them all. On page 34. Yeah, when you read this, you'll think that Billings is a madman, and that he killed his own kids without any remorse. But later in the short story, he contradicts himself by saying, who killed the children? Dr. Harper asked. The boogeyman, Mr. Billings answered immediately on page 35. And this quote substantiates the fact that Billings is a man with no control over his thoughts and emotion, and yes, is very split up into personalities. Yes. Yeah, and now we would like to tell you a little bit about the horror story and the genre of the story. So, according to Rita Schubert's three requirements, this short story is a horror story. The following story, The Boogeyman, contains both a loss, a monster, and it contains the fact that you get scared when you read it. In this story, the loss is seen through the loss of Billings' three children, Denny, Thrill, and Andrew. He loses every one of them to the boogeyman, and precisely the boogeyman is the monster in this story. Last but not least, this story scares you a lot, especially when the monster is creeping out of the closet, and also at the ending when Dr. Harper suddenly becomes the boogeyman, because that haven't anyone expected. So yeah, and about the genre, according to the definition of the genre of a horror story, this story is a psychological horror story. A psychological horror story that often contains the supplanted in your mind, such as things that you can't remember or have forgot. And also it often implies the guilty versus the innocent. So that means that a monster is a blending between the good and the evil, and that a monster often both have a good and an evil side.
Yeah, and this specific element is extremely clear in Stephen King's The Boogeyman. We see this element in our main character, Lester Billings. He has two sides throughout the whole story, and he mentions several times how much he loves his third son Andrew and how sad he is to lose him. And by the quote, but there I was buying him silly crap all at once I realized I love him the most of all. And that's from page 41. Here he says that he loves Andrew very much and he's very, very happy that he is in his life. But at the same time, he appreciates his own life more than Andrew's, just like he did with Denny's and Shrill's, which is very clear in the quote, and I didn't want to move him. I was afraid to after Denny and Shrill. But you did move him, didn't you? Dr. Harper asked. Yeah, Billings did. He smiled a sick yellow smile. Yeah, I did. And that's from page 42. Yeah, so here you see Lester has two personalities. Lester Billings' good personality and the boogeyman as the evil personality. And the closet, which is in Billings' mind through the whole conversation with Dr. Harper, is a symbol. It is a symbol of Billings' inner monster. Billings' inner monster is the boogeyman who's trying to escape from the closet and take over his mind. Well, Billings doesn't mean that he killed his children, but that he's in some way responsible. And with the quote, do you mean you actually killed them? Or no, impatient flick of the hand, but I was responsible. Page 34. Yeah. And the good side of Billings denies that he killed the children. that he killed him, but refers to his inner demon as the Boogeyman who killed the children. And so, with the quote, "Who killed the children?" Harper asked, the Boogeyman, Lester Billings answered immediately from page 35. He says that it is the Boogeyman who killed them, but he feels responsible for it. Yeah. And here you see that Lester Billings has two personalities, and therefore it indicates that he is a sociopath and he doesn't have control over his feelings and emotions.
Yeah, and another evidence that substantiates the fact that this story is psychological is that the story maintains the supplanted. And it's very clear in the story how Lester Billings, he takes all the good things in his life, such as family and children, for granted. And that's also why his inner demon, the Boogeyman, ends up killing his children because he does not appreciate them. And yeah, Billings has forgot or takes all the good things in his life for granted, and that's why the Boogeyman interrupts him to teach him a lesson. And now Billings is sitting with the psychologist, and he wants to go to jail. And the reason why he wants to go to jail is that there's in jail those big windows and no closets, and that's also what the following quote that I will read out loud explains. "I go to jails," Billings said immediately, "for life, and you can see into all the rooms in a jail. All the rooms," he smiled at nothing. From page 35, and yeah, that's why Billings also wants to go to jail, because he's very afraid of this inner demon that can come to him every second and interrupt him.
Yeah, he says since there's no closets and you can see into all the rooms in a jail, there can't be any place in jail where the Boogeyman can hide, so the Boogeyman can follow him. Yeah. Well, now to the message of the story. As we mentioned in our genre definition, Billings takes all the good things in his life for granted. It's a big dream for many people to obtain and create their own family, and not everyone succeeds with this dream and goal. But Billings is one of them who actually gets to live out this dream, but he's just not satisfied and he doesn't appreciate it enough. And that's why his evil side, the Boogeyman, takes control over him, and as a result to his ingratitude.
Yeah, and the author of the story wants to tell us as readers that we have to appreciate the most essential things in our life instead of being unthankful. So we have to appreciate the things that we can obtain, which not everyone can obtain, and appreciate those things instead of not appreciate them. And the message in this story is hidden behind the typical horror features, so you have to look a little long time for finding it, but at the end you'll find this message very clear. Yeah, and to sum it all up, the story's main points: through this analysis and interpretation, we can conclude that Lester Billings is a madman with and he's also a sociopath with two personalities. And because he's a sociopath, the action that the Boogeyman does is hidden in his mind, and it's tearing his thoughts apart. It's the supplanted in Lester that reacts through the Boogeyman, and the reason that the Boogeyman reacts for him is that Lester takes all the good things in his life for granted. Taking things for granted is, all, as we mentioned in our introduction, a very big problem for many people in our modern society. And if you haven't got your values straight, it can end up affecting you and your relationships with those you should love the most.
Yeah. Well, I think that was it, Nils.
Sorry, it took a little over time.
Yeah, we're very sorry, but that was almost impossible for us to do it.
It was impossible.
It was impossible for us to do it in 10 minutes. Yeah. Well, I think that was it. We hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And see you around.
See you on Monday.
See you on Monday in class.
Bye.
Bye.